Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I get off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It's about 5:40 on a balmy Wednesday afternoon in late August. The sky is gloomy and cloudy. It wouldn't surprise me if I get a little rain while I'm walking home, but otherwise should be a nice night for a stroll. I haven't done one of these in a while, so given that I've gotten to play a few new games recently, I thought I would use this opportunity to do a shooting from the hip triple shot. For those of you new to the podcast or haven't heard this feature before, shooting from the hip is my early impressions segment where I take a game that I played recently, maybe once or twice, and just give some quick first impressions of the game to give you a sense of what the game is and my early idea about it. It might be a game that I'm not going to have a chance to play again, or it might be a game that I'm planning to play more, and I'll usually include that in my commentary. The triple shot part goes to the fact that usually when I'm doing this kind of episode, I find that giving quick impressions doesn't really work for a whole episode. So often I'll blend 3 quick impression episodes into one, hence the triple shot. So today's triple shot, I'll be talking about Megacity, Oceania, The Bloody Inn, and Horrified. So 2 bits of the new hotness and 1 older title. I'm just going to go right in order here. It's sort of reverse order that I played them in. So I guess I'm starting with Megacity, Oceania. I got to play this with Scott from Toggle, a friend of ours who went to Gen Con this year and picked this up while he was there. I guess he played it and enjoyed it so much he immediately went over and bought it at the booth that was selling it. This isn't a game I'd heard of before, but it's actually pretty neat. I'm glad to have gotten a chance to play it. The way it works is you have on the table it starts with a hex, and this is a hex about the size of a Catan hex, maybe 3 inches across. And in the middle of the table we have Central Park, and there's a big bag of little plastic pieces, and the plastic pieces are either dark gray, light gray, or translucent, which represent steel, stone, or glass, or steel, concrete, or glass. And the idea is that you are building a building using these pieces. Now, there are a variety of contracts out on the table that allow you to build buildings of different size and shape, and they have various requirements about how the building you make has to look. But the way the game works is that you put together this building. On your turn, you can do a variety of things to gather pieces to build the building with, or to do different bits of architecture. And the focus in the game is to get these buildings built. And the trick of it is that these pieces are all pretty thin, so you have to kind of make this sculpture to make the building. And it's very easy to have them fall over. So you build the sculpture as sturdy as you can, and all the pieces are weird shaped. You build it as sturdy as you can in front of you, and then when it's your turn, you take a deliver action to slide the building from its spot in front of you where you've built it over to the city that everyone is helping develop. And if, while you're sliding it, some pieces fall down, you lose your turn and you have to start over the next turn. So it's got this interesting mechanism where you're trying to get a building built and slide it across the table. Now, you are allowed to build the building closer to the city. I mean, I think you have to be far enough away from the city that if you knock over your building, you're not going to disrupt the city itself. But the trick of that is that the closer you build to the city, the harder it is to get the pieces balanced because your arms are stretched out more. So there's an interesting dichotomy between building close to yourself, where it's easier to build, but then you have to slide your building further. It was a fun game. It's a dexterity game There's rewards for, meeting certain conditions, and there's endgame scoring. It all ended up pretty close. I think the scores were 42, 44, 46. And so a good time was had. That's Megacity, Oceania. The next game I want to talk about is a little bit older. It's a game I've certainly seen played a number of times. And I've always thought it sounded fun, but I never got around to picking it up. It was always a little more expensive than I was willing to spend. But then I encountered it at the Toggle garage sale for $10, and I was like, $10 is worth it. And that's The Bloody Inn. The Bloody Inn is a French game about a group of people who work at an inn and make their money by murdering the people who live at the inn. On your turn, you have these guests who are staying in the inn, and you can bribe them to become part of your team. You can murder them to get their money, or you can let them alone, and at the end of the night, they pay you for having stayed at the hotel. The most profitable thing, of course, is to murder them, but then you have to figure out what to do with the bodies. So there's a whole mechanism where you're hiding bodies and watching out for cops, and if any cops are around in the morning and you have bodies, then you have to quickly pay the town gravedigger to bury them, but he charges $10, and that's quite a bit of money. So it's a fun, and you don't get the money from them then, because for some reason, this is the weirdest, the wonkiest rule. You don't rob their corpse until after you bury them, or you don't rob their corpse till you bury them. So if you have to have the town gravedigger do it, you don't get the money. He charges you £10 and he takes all the money that they had, or you don't get to. So the game has really macabre art. All the characters have this kind of sketchy look that's somewhere between, it's not like Edward Gorey, certainly, but it has a hint of the whimsy of Edward Gorey mixed with the cutting lines and harsh look of something like Ben Templesmith, who is the artist who did 30 Days of Night and Criminal Macabre and a number of other things. But I think the art is one of the most compelling things about the game, and the theme itself is fun. Recruiting the different characters who will help you with the different aspects of burying corpses and stealing money and so on. It's a lot of fun. So like I said, the theme and the art are really good. The game itself is a little bit tricky to explain. I understood the rules fairly clearly, but it took more effort than I would have thought to explain all the rules to the players we had. But everybody, once that was explained, it went really well, and I think people had a lot of fun. Definitely a game probably plays in half an hour or a little more once you played a few times. So that's The Bloody Inn. Definitely worth a try. The last game I want to talk about today, my buddy Paul came over to play our weekly game of Scythe, which we're trying to get through the Rise of Fenris, and he brought with him Horrified. Horrified is one of the new games from, I think they're called Prospero Hall, a design group that has designed a number of games for the Target exclusive line. I think they did the Bob Ross game and the Kenny G Keep It Saxy. Horrified is set around the Universal Monsters theme. It's a co-op where you have a group of people in a village and you're all trying to fight off a combination of the monsters from the Universal horror pictures. There's Dracula, Wolfman, the Mummy, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and Frankenstein's monster and his bride. Now, I think the game has at most 4 enemies in play. We tried it with 3, which is sort of normal mode, and it felt pretty tight in terms of winning, but we were still a couple fails away from losing. So we weren't on the verge of losing, but we were not entirely far from it either. I think the wrong pull of cards could have cost us the game. So in Horrified, like I said, you play a group of people trying to prevent the Universal monsters from causing too much trouble. You're in this sort of glorified town. It reminds me of the Arkham Horror board game or the Buffy the Vampire Slayer board game. And the idea is you are collecting items which you then have to take to the particular spot where the villain is from, and then play a mini game with those items in order to stop the monster. And then once you've completed that minigame, then the monster is eligible to be stopped. And then you have to do something else to stop them. It's a pretty simple mechanic. You're just trying to gather items and use the items. Each character has their own special power, and these become the central cooperative engine that you use to win the game. It was fine if you like Pandemic and you want something sort of similar weight, but perhaps a little more family friendly. Horrified is a nice game in that regard. If you really like, say, the Universal Monsters, that in that way it's a good game. Overall, it's a pretty simple or pretty light game for what it is. I think if you expected something heavier from a Target exclusive game about the Universal Monster Pictures, you're probably buying the wrong games. But I mean, overall, the art was nice. The gameplay was good, much better than you would expect from a junk game. I mean, it's not a junk game, and I wouldn't have expected it to be one, but it's not all that uncommon to have licensed games be not good, and this actually was pretty good. So definitely worth a play if you get a chance. So I'm about a block and a half away, and depending on construction, I may want to wrap up soon. You know, like I said, I try not to have these be too much reviews because I am not a reviewer, and I'm also a game designer, so there's a bit of conflict of interest there. But I do like to talk about things that work and don't work for me in game design and what I've learned from them. All three of the games that I talked about in this episode, Megacity, Oceania, The Bloody Inn, and Horrified, they're all decent games. They were enjoyable to play. I would play them again if somebody got them out. None of them gave me the bug that says I should go buy them. I think I'd be interested to show Megacity in particular to my kids because I think they would like the balancing aspect. I know my wife would really dislike it. The Bloody Inn, I'm happy to play again, and that one I do have, so I'm glad I have it. But I don't know that it's going to need to stay in my collection a long time. I guess it depends how other people in the family feel about it. It's the most clever of the three, and if I am going to own one of the three, I'm glad it's that one. I think it has the most potential for replay and play in my family group. So I've got another minute or two left here, so I'm keen to hear from you. What new games have you played lately? We're heading toward the end of August, so I'm getting back into my work schedule, so pretty soon I'll be producing a couple episodes a week. I was going to produce 2 this week, but I ended up coming home on Monday after work, I ended up doing something else instead. So I hope to hear from you about the game. You can contact me, Brendan, at rattleboxgames.com, or you could head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269, where we have the Pick Up and Deliver Guild, where we talk about this and other episodes of the show. In particular, I'm keen to hear, have you played any of these games, or what games, if you were going to do a Shootin' from the Hip episode today, what games would you be talking about? Tell us about it over on Board Game Geek, and I'll look forward to reading those. Otherwise, thanks for joining me, and I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.